So I'll introduce Niall Smith here from Sketchbook. He's going to lead the panel, so I will let Niall introduce everyone and the panel discussion. They're here to talk about, to give us permission to fail and help drive innovation in research. So
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, so welcome. Thank you all for joining. As Katie was saying, so this is a panel all about permission to fail. What we're looking at here is risk, experimentation, and sort of incubating, encouraging creativity in the research industry. My own experience, I was just talking about it, in fact, my own experience with failure starts very early in that my parents gave me a name that really nobody can then pronounce as soon as they see it written down. So I'm very, it's very much part of my mindset. I'm joined today by four wonderful panelists, and I will ask them all to introduce themselves in a moment. But yeah, so what I'd love for you to all to get out of this is to feel a bit inspired, think about how you can encourage and foster creativity in your organisation. The actual session is going to split into two. I want to make sure you'll get an opportunity to ask questions. So we've got kind of two halves to it. The first half is going to be about failure and what that means for us as an industry. And then we'll pause for questions, we'll have 5 minutes of questions. And then the second half is then how do we encourage, how do we foster creativity in the industry? So then again, there'll be questions and observations from you at that point as well. So without further ado, I'll ask the wonderful panel to introduce themselves. Maybe we'll start with you, Bex. Oh yes, we failed to have enough mics.
Is it on? Yes.
It is on.
Sorry, yeah, we only have 2 mics, so we're going to have to share a bit. Oh, 3 now. Yes, sorry, my name's Rebecca Cole, or Bex, and I'm Managing Director at Cobalt Sky. We are at the operations end of the sector, so we do online web surveys and data processing. And I'm also co-chair of the ASC, and I also sit on main board for MRS.
Hi everybody, my name is Danny Russell. Are there any clients in the room today? Right, so I am the sole client, or I was. So 27 years at Boots, Kraft, British Airways, Sky, and Telefonica O2, and then I had a mental breakdown, and no, I didn't. I became completely exhausted of client side, and 10 years ago started my own consultancy, which is DRC, and I now work as a non-exec for 4 agencies, one of whom's in the room, plus do some supplier side stuff. So I always get this wrong way around. Poacher turned gamekeeper, I think is the term.
Brilliant. Hi there, my name's Jack. I'm one of the founders at CoLoop. CoLoop is an AI content analysis tool for Qual. In terms of my background, I've been working on applying language models to research and optimizing research since about 2020, back when it was just GPT-2. Right now, today, we work on analysis for qualitative research consultancies, and our platform is used by over 160 research consultancies today.
Thanks. Too many now.
I'm Richard Owen. Some of you may have seen me speak earlier. I'm head of innovation at Firefish, which is one of the UK's leading qual agencies. Before that, I started out at Kantar, I've been at Hall & Partners Omnicom. I've built a mobile app platform called CrowdLab with Niall here, which we managed to scale and sell a few years ago. And I've also had a little side journey into the craft brewing industry. But if you want to know about failure, don't get involved in craft brewing 6 months before a global pandemic. It's not the best idea.
Yeah, thank you. So let's say this session is all about failure. So what I'd like to start with is there a particular a moment in your career or something you could talk about that sort of comes to mind when I think about sort of failure? Like what happened and how was that for you?
I mean, just pick up on the beer,
Yep.
The beer one. That was a really interesting one. I mean, it was a bit of obviously a side passion project. Made me realise afterwards that just because you've done really well in, say, professional services sector doesn't mean you know how to run a manufacturing company, which is basically what brewing is. It's the beer bit of brewing is almost like the tiniest part. There's so much on. I think the other thing that taught me as well is something I think for anyone starting out and trying to do things differently is the people that you're working with, think about how it's going to be when times are tough and you're in the trenches, rather than with all the ambition and the good stuff at the start, because that's when you really kind of find out who you're friendly, as it were.
Yeah, I'll go next. So one thing that comes to mind for me when talking about failure, and actually part of the reason why I was very interested in joining for this panel, was a product that we worked on prior to getting started with CoLoop, which was for doing essentially summarization of secondary research. It was a tool that we sold mostly to academics and people doing literature review, and although we sold a lot of it and we scaled it to a certain amount of revenue, it was never really a smash hit. And I think that what that really taught me, and why I was kind of interested in joining this as well, was this idea around not being afraid to fail, and actually having the courage and the strength to say when something isn't working, to step away from it, even at high cost, and start to think about how you can move from a local maxima to a much greater one. And so I think, very interested today in this discussion, and kind of curious to radiate that message and make people start to think about the times and circumstances under which accepting failure is actually okay and is a really important part of reaching success.
I think for me, we had a situation when I was at Sky where I felt that the senior exec had completely lost touch with reality, and customers in particular. So we'd gone through a huge growth phase with digital TV, and I thought we're struggling here. We had a churn rate of 10%, but it wasn't really 10%, it was 50%. We had 50% of our base were calling us up on an annual basis, trying to get out of their contract, and we basically bribed them and reported to the board that it was 10%, which couldn't go on because we were losing a lot of money out of that. So I took a massive risk at the time, which was thought, I've got to get the exec in front of the customer. So I've got to get the exec to realise what it's like to be a customer, and part of that was I got them to try and sell Sky. It was at Westfield Shopping Centre. We had one of those pop-ups, you might remember. And I set the exec the target of who could sell the most, because they're a very competitive bunch. And I'm in a back room with the rest of my crew, just making sure everything's okay. And then the police arrive because James Murdoch has sold Sky Television subscription to a 13-year-old. His parents had then gone to the police. And so these two police officers arrived with two security guards. And I thought, this is not going very well. But anyway, it was fine, right? Because it was reality. James didn't realise that he wasn't allowed to sell Sky to a 13-year-old child. He was uber competitive and wanted to get a sale, and still argued right the way through my career at Sky. Still argued that was still unfair and against the rules, and he shouldn't have had that chalked off. We had a nice conversation with the police officers, and everything was fine, and we were all friends in the end. But certainly what I thought was a good idea at the time, when the police officers arrived in the room, I thought, this is not going well. So it was almost a massive failure for me.
Thank you. Neil actually said he wanted light-hearted examples, so mine's going to feel a bit frivolous now, and it's not really a failure, it's more of a mistake that I made. And I'd been in the sector for only about 6 months, and originally I was a quantum spec writer, data processor. And back then we didn't always get a Quacks file out with our metadata. We quite often had to type by hand, the questions and the text and everything that were going to appear in the tables. And I had an email from a client, I'd only been at the company for 6 months, where he said that he'd only realised when he was presenting these tables that I'd given him to his end client, that was a mobile phone provider, that on one of the statements where I was meant to have written, I like my mobile phone to reflect my personality, I typed, I like my mobile phone to replace my personality. And he didn't realise this until it had got through. Luckily, he saw the funny side of it. But actually, in terms of what that taught me, obviously it's test your work, check your work. But actually, as programmers, and I don't know if there's any other kind of programmers in the room, we do tend to we check our code. and I checked all the numbers in the tables and the summaries and all that, and it's the same with online survey scripting. We check our routing and we check all our filtering, and quite often we're so obsessed with checking whether our code's right, we forget to actually read it like a human and go through, and we always say that now is, check all your routing, check your syntax, check everything, but then go through the survey like a human being, because otherwise your code might be right, but you've done something bonkers for a human being. So yeah.
In a similar vein, I remember once running a project where the whole purpose of the project was to match the data against this postcode segmentation. And then I realized after the fieldwork completed that I hadn't asked anybody what their postcode was. So, and I guess like the part of the point from this is that we're all still here. Like actually, like everybody makes mistakes, everybody has failures, but we all survive them in some way or another. And yeah, I think one of the things that I've always felt is that the research industry is a very risk-averse industry. And so I wondered, the panel, do you agree? Why do you think that is? Perhaps Danny, we could start with you.
So it's called aticophobia. So if you take nothing out of this session the next hour, then you've learned a new word. So aticophobia is fear of failure. And I think, I don't know, maybe some people don't. Very small percentage of the population don't, but most people do. Fear failure, because I think it's what keeps us alive, right? It stops you from running into burning buildings, for example. And I think what makes our sector great is what causes us to be more risk averse. I mean, it's almost by definition, we're more analytical, we're more reasoned, we're more logical, and therefore I think that is why we're possibly we are, and we're certainly perceived as being more risk averse. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it's what makes us good, but yes, it can be a disadvantage as well.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say, Jack, have you experienced as somebody obviously like supplying or selling to the research industry? Is your impression that we are, a more conservative industry?
I think it really varies, and it depends on different customers. I think we've kind of found in our experience that there are various different segments out there, and there are some people who have very successfully created a culture of innovation, like the team at Firefish, who I think are very good at kind of exploring new ideas and trying new things, and I think have kind of established that. Whereas in other cases, I think there are folks who, as you say, are scared to shake the tree. They have a process, they know it works. They are a bit more hesitant to bring something in that might perturb that and potentially lead to adverse consequences. And I think that really it's a bit of a spectrum. And I think one of the sort of differentiating factors that we've seen really is companies where I think they've successfully managed to create that, and oftentimes there are folks working within them who have past experience working on building their own products or launching their own companies, even in some cases who I think have been the most sort of quick to adopt these things, and the sort of easiest to provide feedback from, and the best to work with from our perspective.
Mm-hmm. And do we think that there are particular challenges then associated with being more risk averse as an industry? Rich?
Yeah, I think it's part of, as Danny said, it's part of who we are, and then I think it's part of a lot of the briefs we get. So I spent a long time in my early days at Mill Brown and kind of developing kind of the link test, which is a tool to largely for clients to go like, I don't want to make any mistakes. I mean, there's a huge debate about whether it creates better advertising, but it certainly stops a lot of failures. And that whole mindset, I think, drives a process that is conservative, is about not making mistakes rather than optimizing oftentimes, and therefore we're looking for trouble. I always sometimes maybe unfairly think that we're a bit like VAR match officials. It's like if you have 3 people staring at a screen, they're going to find problems on the pitch, right? Which no one else in the stadium or on the pitch has seen. So I think that whole mentality drives that. So when it comes to new stuff, I don't think as an industry, we often celebrate as much the potential of those new things as look for the reasons why it won't work. And even in the debates about AI now, but quite rightly, there's a caution, but everyone's looking. I feel like the debate's lobsided towards the fear factor rather than the upside factor, and that kind of permeates this whole thing.
Yeah, and I think just going back to the why our sector specifically maybe is a bit worse than others. And Rich, this is something that you mentioned when we were chatting before, is, we have to look at who are we attracting into the sector? What sort of personality, what sort of people? And I do think, with a few exceptions, we're not really disruptive people. We're all quite well behaved, and I think we need to look. Some of us, Jerome, are quite well behaved. I think we need to look at, how do we get, and Jack, as you were saying, people from other sectors to see research as something that is exciting, that can be given, and empowered to take risks. So I think we need to look at who we're tempting in to the sector, and I also think. And again, Danny, kind of similar to what you were saying at the start, we are a quite highly regulated sector, which I think is a good thing. I think it's a strength of ours. Whether or not it helps with innovation and experimentation, I'm not sure. I've been in rooms where people are having conversations and they're throwing ideas around, and then it ends with, well, we'll have to check what the code of conduct says about whether we're allowed to do that or not. I'm not suggesting that the code of conduct is a bad thing, but as we are used to being, obviously I'm not saying that, we are used to being very highly regulated. And again, I think that makes us slightly less brave, potentially. We're kind of, we've got, what would Nanny say if we, tried to do this kind of thing?
I think there's something interesting as well of how we define ourselves as an industry. Because I feel like there's two sort of market research worlds going on. There's the world that you described there, and then there seems to be this other world where that I suppose someone like Jack has kind of come into, where having done sort of startups and gone out looking for investment, it's like there's this whole world out there that's getting loads of money poured into it, that's trying new stuff, that's on the frontier of all this stuff, and it's straying into our world. And it's almost like it can exist, and it's sort of slightly eating us as well, because we're sort of protecting that world.
But of course, when that world does kind of turn towards us, I do think that we become a bit scared of it, because you hear about multiple things, whatever it is, whether it's AI or just automation in general. You hear people like, oh, it's a wild west out there. And we don't like that, really. We want it to be a bit more regulated and a bit, if you go, it's a Wild West, we think, well, we instantly need to have some regulation so that we know what we're buying and what we're selling on as a product. So when that world comes into us, I think we instantly want to stick some rules on it and make it, fit the original part.
And maybe there's also a bit of a shift, that I've seen throughout my career, where we've moved from the sort of researcher as scientist mindset to maybe more of a sort of research as creative mindset, and I think maybe we could, in terms of even just like, when I first started in the industry, everybody's wearing a suit all the time, and it's very, very sort of formal, and we've moved towards something which is a bit more sort of informal and more in the mold of like the marketing departments and teams that we are working with. And Danny, I was going to say, I mean, is there something in which the kind of client-supplier relationship feeds into sort of a tendency to avoid risk or?
Yes, so this is where I'm massively critical of certain clients, right? Not at all everybody. I'm massively overgeneralizing. It always kind of astonishes me if you're interviewing somebody, right? You're interviewing, they're always going to come out and go, oh yeah, I love taking risks, and I love pushing the boundaries, and I like to be really, really busy all the time. And then you give them the job, and within a week, it's just like they're doing exactly the same thing as what the previous person did. Because it used to be, I'll have to update, actually I think I will update it. So it used to be in my era that you would say nobody got sacked for buying IBM. And I think the more modern one is probably nobody gets sacked for hiring McKinsey. And it's a truism. It's absolutely true, right? Which is, and this is why McKinsey and Bain and BCG come in and do, £6 million projects. which is basically retelling the business what the insight team has told them 15 times before. But they are brilliant at telling that story, and because they are McKinsey and Bain and whoever, everybody strokes their beards and go, oh, this is amazing stuff, you know, and you know, you get 50 binders of that sits away, and nobody does anything with it. But nobody gets sacked, and everybody's really comfortable with that. And you will. I think you'll know clients that want to be innovative, and you'll know clients that don't want to be innovative. So I've always had the rule with my teams, which is I won't implement a roster process, because I think that takes away the ability to use fresh agencies and fresh methodologies. And the second thing is, I always said to my teams, if you're going to run a tender process, I will not allow you to choose the incumbent. Okay? Because the whole process, the whole reason that you're running that very expensive and very time-consuming tender process is to get a new agency. And if you're not going to choose a new agency, then I want you to fix the incumbent, right? Because that is your job. So I do become massively critical. I think there's loads of agencies out there that have got superb ideas, and actually it's often the clients who are way more introverted and, oh God, that sounds a bit risky, than the agencies. So I'm actually not critical of our sector at all. I think, you know, whenever Mike Stevens puts a post up about here's all these amazing new platforms, I'm always just like astounded. And I really wonder how there's 200 businesses out there making any money at all. I'm just always like, I could probably name 5, and then he's got a list of sort of 200 up there. And the innovation, I think, is coming from the agencies. I do think it's the clients that are too introverted because they're concerned about not buying IBM or not hiring McKinsey.
So it sounds like there's a degree of sort of reputational risk that people sort of fear then. I mean, and that obviously is true at a client side. Is that true at a sort of agency or supplier side? Like, is there a fear? Do you think there's a fear in researchers that their credibility is at stake if they make a mistake?
Go ahead. I think so. I think nobody wants to be the person that sort of, you know, sold in the project and then has, you know, a Danny on the phone to the MD going, you know, what's this whole project's gone up in flames. And so I think yeah, that's just human nature. I think as well, I've experienced, you know, even when people are willing to kind of sell something that you've come up with that's a bit more experimental, getting knocked back by clients, and of course you get a couple of knockbacks, you just kind of go, oh yeah, clients don't want that thing. So I think that does go on, yeah. I think to Danny's point about agencies, I think there's I think we'll come on to talk in the second half about ways kind of we can get around some of this stuff. But I think he's right. It's like, I don't think many agencies lack for like really good innovative ideas that might be quite disruptive, but it's how they put their heads up above the parapet, how they convince a client to do it, and there's that constant fear of it's all going to go wrong. So we kind of need to try and break that, I think, in partnership with clients a bit.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think just sort of add to that, I guess on the tech side, I suppose what we see really is that there's just such a velocity to the rate at which things are improving and coming out, that there are so many new techniques and products and different platforms, as you say, hitting the market all the time, that I think there's just a wash of information and very little data out there for people to kind of see what's working, what isn't. Everyone's really holding their cards close to their chest. There's, regulation, that guidelines are all in flux, and so I think there's not a lot of information for people to go on, and so it just seems only natural that, given that sort of environment, people are going to really err on the side of caution and not want to be the first person that jumps over the parapet and makes the mistake, or becomes the one that's the example of why that was a bad idea. And I think that's sort of really confounded by just the echo chamber, and I think the velocity of these things, and people kind of sharing their thoughts flagrantly everywhere and kind of just adding to that noise, I think, in in the environment when people are trying to sort of really just see the wood for the trees and see where the opportunities are.
And in the sort of tech space, I mean, I think there is a slightly different relationship with risk and with failure. Is that fair? I mean, in terms of your own experience sort of starting up, I mean, is there still that sort of concern about credibility, about what it means to fail?
Yeah, I think when I left university and decided to go and pursue a career building tech tools for research, a lot of my friends went off, and there was this kind of joke when you graduated that there's the sort of university sorting hat, and it would fling you into one sort of industry or another. You go be a lawyer, or you go be like a banker or a consultant at McKinsey or something. And so I think for me, there was personally huge reputational credibility that was at risk, and I hadn't gone and done those things. And I remember speaking to people at parties and feeling a little self-conscious about the state that things were in for our company, or especially at points when it wasn't working very well. I think that the point at which my co-founder and I started to really make a ton of progress was when we completely accepted that and really just became one with the fact that failing at stuff and trying things again and again is really how eventually you get to things that work. And I think once you kind of free yourself of that ego and you sort of become content with the fact that not everything you try is going to work, and that's not a reason to stop trying, then I think you become a lot more honest, and you can evaluate the outcomes of things better, and you can make better decisions next time.
Great. So I'd like to pause there at that point and just sort of see if there are any sort of observations or questions from the audience just about sort of failure. I say we'll come on to talk about how we might overcome some of these challenges, but just in terms of reflections from yourselves, does this chime with your experience? Any observations or questions for the panel at this point? Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Bex. So you're going to have an issue if the question is for you.
Well, we'll just have a chat.
Yeah.
I guess some observation. I guess I've been trying to innovate for some time. Won a few, lost a few. And one of the things that I felt has been an issue, but may well be getting better now, is within the research agency, there's often somebody, a researcher, that has the relationship with the client. And it takes some time to gain the trust of that researcher as someone who is a specialist in innovation technology, to be able to be taken to a client. And sometimes there is a unwillingness, I think because they fear that their relationship could be tarnished, they'd rather play it safe. And therefore, I think one of the things researchers need to do is believe that they are stronger and better by surrounding themselves with experts that they can bring in to talk to the clients. And that's a brave thing to do, but I've seen lots of examples of how that can really work.
So sort of admit that you don't know everything, and that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, a researcher wears a lot of hats,
Yeah.
and they're very good for doing that. But there's always a danger that by doing that, you don't expose clients to where your real expertise can lie. And I do believe that a client would much rather have the full reach of the experience, whether or not it's internal, or even if an agency uses external expertise. I think that the client would rather be exposed to all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just respond to that? And then a brilliant point, and it's what management consultants do all the time. So I remember working with BCG. They put a team forward that we met, and we didn't gain a huge amount of positive feeling that they were going to be able to crack the issue that we had, which was a fairly major issue. And a week later, they brought in the head of ANZ, is it a bank in New Zealand? They'd literally gone and poached the head of churn, who had an incredible low churn rate in New Zealand. And they literally poached him and brought him in and put him on the team. And now I'm not suggesting that everybody's got the money to do that, obviously BCG have, but they will formulate the right team for that particular issue, as I say, as opposed to what you're saying, which is sort of pretend that one person knows everything. So I think it's a really good point.
Thank you. I was just going to ask, what advice do you have of creating an environment of psychological safety within your organisations to allow this culture of innovation and experimentation to happen?
Well,
Any tips?
fortunately, that's what the second half is going to be all about.
Aha.
So it's
Nice little
almost like I
segue.
planted you in the audience, but I promise I didn't. So, yeah, I mean, so on that point then, I think, I mean, one of the challenges, I think, with a more risk-averse industry is that it does sort of, it makes it more difficult to innovate. It makes it more difficult to try new things, to take on new technologies and see how that works out. So I wonder if you could give me an example of when you've tried something new and how you kind of got buy-in for that, how you sort of went about sort of selling that into the company. Rich, perhaps we could start with you. I hope.
Yeah, I think, I mean, one way that's I found quite useful a couple of times is having had either had the idea or, you know, as a management team had the idea of a new process or a new product, is actually going around and spending a lot of time with teams about that area and understand some of their frustrations of the way things are done today. Because then you gather all that information up. Then when you kind of, you know, go and announce what you're up to them, it definitely has like emotional resonance because it's clearly listened to a lot of their challenges. So that's really good for sort of internal processing. So you're not just coming in and going like, oh, I've just been sold this new piece of tech that's going to make your lives brilliant. And I was like, where's that come from? If it's been rooted in, oh yeah, we've been having these conversations for months about certain parts of our process that suck up our time or are too manual or whatever it may be, then I think when you come back and land, even if you haven't solved it all, but you've sort of given them the direction of travel you want to go in, then I think you get buy-in all around. So I think similarly externally with sort of new products that you want to do, I think if clients see, you know, it's all rooted in challenges that everyone's experienced, I think, you know, you may still fail, but you're off to a better start, and the sort of the barriers of resistance have gone down, which always go up if you just sort of come in from the top and go, we have decided we're going to do this and make this change. If you've done it the other way around, I think you've got a much better environment.
I mean, Stephen Zappi was saying this morning, you know, that there's to do something, to make some sort of fundamental change, you have to kind of go in with an expectation that there's going to be some fuck-ups along the way. Is that sort of part of that process then? Yeah, no, and I think people give you a lot more tolerance for that if they know kind of where it's coming from. I mean, all of this stuff, and that's what Steve was talking about, it's, you know, the tech is almost, a lot of times the tech or the methodological change is the easy bit. It's the change of people's habits and processes. It's the change management bit, which is always hard. And if they don't have any sense of, you know, where that's come from and where you're going, then they just won't buy in. But I think if, again, lots of examples, if they have understood why the change is coming and where it's leading, then I think the tolerance for fuck-ups along the way is much greater. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess just to build on what Richard's saying there as well, I think it's quite interesting. You know, it's sort of, you know, I think we've experienced this with developing products too. If you come at it with more of the approach that you're, you know, effectively in this research phase and you're trying something out, it's okay for your research to produce unexpected results or for it to not work. And so as long as you set those expectations with people and you know they're aware that, you know, you're doing this to learn about the problem or the process you're trying to improve, then I think people are very helpful, and they, you know, and you get a lot more feedback and a lot more value out of running that exercise, and it's much clearer what you should do next. I think speaking more broadly as well about the tech industry, another thing that I found hugely helpful for fostering an environment where people aren't afraid to try things is to just be generally more aware of how many massive companies today or products around there are that were not the overnight successes that they appeared to be. I mean, for instance, like, I don't know how many people remember the first iPhone when that launched. It was a terrible, terrible phone. It had no apps. It had no 3G. It had terrible battery life. It was rubbish. And, you know, for me personally, I think it was only at least around some 3 iterations later before that kind of came into my consciousness and was, you know, appeared to be this sort of overnight success that emerged out of nowhere. And I think the more you dig into these things, and the more you look at the products, services, and tools you use today, the more you realize that they're from a long lineage of things that really didn't work and that people launched, they tried, they gathered feedback on and treated like a research project and iterated and improved.
There's something in that, isn't there, of people ultimately don't remember all of the failures that happened before. That actually what they remember is the success, and that can feel like it was overnight, but actually, of course, any success, well, most successes are built on a lot of attempts that maybe didn't work out the first time around. Danny, is there an example? You just Mike's thrown at you. Is an example from your side on the kind of client side of that sort of attempt at sort of fostering creativity within the agencies that you've worked with, or using the sort of the holding the purse strings, I suppose, as a client side of.
So I think I'm going to talk about this at IX. I don't know if anybody's going to Amsterdam next week, but given what I was saying about clients, I think being more risk averse than agencies. Clients I don't think buy new tech.
Mm-hmm.
They buy solutions to problems. And what I'm giving away next week at IX, I'll give away now, a week early, is what I call the 3P model. And the 3P model, I think, is what agencies don't do very well, and what clients are looking for all the time, is the first P is problem. So what is the problem that you're going to help me overcome? The second point is the product or the protocol. And then the third point is proof. And I think agencies sometimes get it the wrong way around, and they want to talk about product or the protocol first. And I don't think clients have very big brains, and therefore they sort of struggle to try and work out, it all sounds very interesting, but it sounds pretty risky. Management consultants, again, are brilliant at, you have a particular issue, the product has failed, your churn rate's too high, you're not selling enough, you've issued 3 profit warnings in 18 months. That's the sort of thing that a client is wanting you to come along and help. The second thing is, and we have a product that solves that problem, and here's the proof. And the proof is really important because the proof reduces the risk, which is what we're talking about here. You cannot convince somebody and go, no, honestly, this is really going to work, unless you have a brilliant relationship with them. What clients are after, they move in huge swathes. And what clients are after is, who else has done this? And that's the proof point. So here's the awards that we've won. Here's the testimonials that we've received from other clients that are using this product. And I think that really genuinely helps get onto their thought process. There was a piece of research recently came out from Bowen, which not only looks at market research, it looks at marketing as a whole. I think it also looks at tech and IT, etc. But they interviewed, I think it was 1,300 people, companies, and 90% of agencies that were bought were on what they call day one list. So they weren't new. So you've got 90% of clients buying stuff from agencies that they're already buying from. So if you come along with a new piece of tech, you have to work really hard, right? Because you're already only one of 10 opportunities. But bear in mind that 3P, right? The more that we can link our product and protocol to the solving of a problem and backing it up with proof, the more likely clients will take the risk on you. And it is a risk, right? As I say, if you're not a McKinsey or not an IBM, if you're a new supplier, that is a risk to them. That's just a fact. It might not be right, but it is just human nature.
I was going to say, I think that's really interesting. I look forward to more next week.
That's it, you don't need to go now. You know everything.
I'm definitely going to Amsterdam. But I think it's really interesting because I think a lot of times when we as agencies are bringing in new tech, and again, AI is a good one because it's making us very efficient in a lot of ways, and everyone gets really, really excited about that. but then we often get to talk to the clients, I go like, oh, look at this thing we're doing with AI. But ultimately, I think clients go like, I don't really care how you're doing it. Like, what's the report going to, what's the deliverable, what's the difference you're going to make to the business? And so I think you're absolutely right. We end up pitching a new tool about the wonders of all the stuff behind the scenes without having articulated why the client should care about it.
Yeah.
And that's why we don't sell that very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too much of a focus then on the sort of the product that sits behind it, or the process.
The process and
Yeah.
the methodology and the sort of research purism, and I think for a lot of clients, like they don't care. They want to buy, they're buying smart people who are going to solve their problems, right?
I'm not a religious person, but there is a line in the Bible, I think it's in Luke, which is, do unto others as you have done unto yourself, something like that. I often think as a sector, we're not good at doing to our clients we're not good at doing to ourselves what we say to our clients. So if we're working for a client, we'll quite often go back to them, and the recommendation after a big piece of quant or whatever it is, here's the problem that your customer faces, and here's the solution. Here's your product. We're going to rewrite your product proposition or whatever. It's exactly the same two things. And often I think we don't do that to ourselves. We don't look at our sector or our agency offerings and package it in a way that makes it easy for people to buy. And it always astounds me that we spend all this time, talking to massive clients and telling them what to do, but we don't look at it ourselves and go, how could we market ourselves better? Is what you were saying earlier about the sector and the fact that we've got all these regulations. Do we ever look at ourselves and say, somebody mentioned earlier, which I'm going to be talking about at an SMR event on the 9th of July, which is, should we be called market research anymore? So if you say market research to people, most people won't give you, they'll give you a stereotypical view of market research. They'll talk about 25-minute questionnaires. They won't talk about some of the stuff that this gentleman is producing. And so again, I think we need to do unto others, do unto ourselves as we do unto others. I think there's a massive learning for us there.
Bex, I was going to say, like, from a sort of supplier side, what opportunity, if any, do you have to innovate and take risks within that sort of side or that role?
So, yeah, we are very rarely brought in at that ideation stage. Now, we have to innovate and experiment a lot, but the reason we have to do that is because the client has come to us with something they've already decided. So we want to do a web page, but it's a conjoint, and the conjoint is being driven by a Gamble Granger and whatever. There you go. Now, we haven't done it before. A lot of people haven't done it before. We have to innovate in going, how are we going to actually achieve what you want us to produce for you? But again, as you were saying, Rich, they don't care how we do it. They've gone, we've had this idea, and they will say to us, is it possible? And we go, well, okay, we'll find a way. But the irony is always, and I know we're going to go on to talk about how do you foster, a safe space to innovate, but they'll go, okay, we've got this crazy idea. Do you think you can do it? Yes. Leave it. Okay, great. When can I have a test link? I don't even know how we're going to do it yet. So, until, we've tried something and it hasn't worked, I realise you need a time scale of some sort, but if you're coming to us with a thing that you don't know how to do and you're asking us to find a solution for, please don't ask us to then commit to a time scale that you're then going to go and give to your end client, and we're going, we don't know yet. So, that's kind of more our experience, is given a problem, and then we have to innovate to solve it, but no one really cares other than awards, how we've done that.
Yeah. So there is, time to innovate is probably kind of a key requirement.
Yeah, and again, I think, as AJ was talking about trust, it is about trust, because a lot of our clients who come to us with these things, they do trust that we will find a solution, and they can just kind of leave us to it. And they trust us as well to know that we're always going to be honest with them, and also timing-wise, we're going to do our best. They know that if we say, I simply cannot tell you right now, but I will give you an update in a week that will happen. And we won't have just gone, well, actually, we've not got time to look at it. We will look at it. They trust us to do that, but they kind of, could be better at going, give us a week, and then I'll come back to you. They still go, okay, well, does that mean in a week I'll have an answer? Sometimes that isn't the case, so yeah.
So, I mean, trust then, again, sounds like a kind of a key thing to the earlier point about sort of a safe space. Like, how do you kind of create a safe space, give people that trust to fail, but sort of celebrate the attempt as opposed to treating it as a disaster, I suppose.
I mean, I think I've found most success within sort of agency structures of basically having a division within the agency that's responsible for that idea, like taking, however it's formed, taking it sort of to the right of the main business. So the AI, the Qualify AI thing that we launched in February is a slightly sort of side business to Firefish, because Jem, the CEO of Firefish, has long come to the conclusion that the biggest blocker to innovation in research agencies are researchers.
Yeah.
So if we take that slightly separately, that's given us the latitude to just play around, run quick, make decisions, try things out that don't have to go through some kind of like constant filtering and bringing people on board. So I think you have to give people that leeway to go, you're going to do something different, let's make it a different thing. Don't try and do it from within the main agency, because it'll just take too long and it'll just keep falling down. So that's one thing I'd definitely encourage, is ring fencing that time and giving people that latitude. I think it's about celebrating failure, but I think there's also, you've got to make sure that you then launch something that has some legs. It might not be perfect, but it can go to the conversations with the researchers who will take you to your client because it's been founded in something. And you've got to get there pretty quickly, otherwise everyone's just going, what are those people over there doing, like sucking up cost and never coming out with anything? But I think that gives you the space, and then it gives the teams the confidence to put you in front of their client because they know you've been working on something, and it's kind of well thought through as well. So that's sort of organisationally how I think it's always worked better when I've got involved in things, is having something separate. And then once you've got it working, you can scale that back through the business. But I think it's really hard to do that just within everyone's day-to-day job.
So giving a select group of people the sort of time and permission.
Time and permission and money if you've got it. I think it could be a separate thing. Like I was sort of brought in to do something, but it could be someone who's got an idea and championing that. But if someone's got a really good idea, I think you've got to bring them out of what they're doing. We always have had some version of like, the old Google Fridays thing where it's like every Friday you could do whatever you want, just work on a passion project. Now I think in much smaller places than Google, in order to make that work, you might not give them every Friday all day. You've got to get them to sell you the idea and tie it to what you're trying to do as a business anyway. But again, I think that's another idea of like backing people with a little bit of ring fencing of their time to contribute what they can in service of that innovation.
And Danny, I was going to say, you kind of touched on this before, like clients will buy something if they feel there's proof. So in a sense, that is a kind of risk. They're trying to minimize the risk from the get-go. And yet the challenge here is that I think like agencies, to your point, Rich, agencies want to feel like they can sell the thing pretty quickly. So how do you sort of square that circle? Like how do clients, or do you feel that there is a way to convince clients to take on more risky prospects?
Yeah, I think as goes back to the point, I think we've got to be better and more confident of selling and marketing. It was interesting. I was on a call this morning. I won't say what it was about, but I was just saying it was interesting because from an advertising perspective, it's about proof of return on investment, right? And we're often the ones that are redesigning products or taking cost reductions into the products and making huge successes of it. But we rarely talk about it, right? Everybody's really nervous about talking about it. Advertising agencies, on the other hand, have got all to do with the actual product. They just come out with a very expensive glossy ad and they take all the credit for it, no problems at all, right? So we're in Egham and they're in Cannes. And they'll just go, the success of this product was because we did this 45-second ad, and it's fucking amazing. And we'll sit in there going, we did some really good conjoint analysis, which proved this, that, and the other. And I think part of it is, again, we've got to do to ourselves what we do to others, because we will do the research, and we will say to a brand, and we're all working for amazing brands, and we will go, here's the 3 things that you've got to go out and talk about, because that will knock your customer barriers over. But I don't feel that we do it to ourselves. So the proof point is tough, because if you've got a new piece of innovation, it's new, and therefore, by definition, you probably haven't got that much proof. And I am not at all, with Rebecca sitting next to me, saying that we should go bypass the codes or anything like that. But I do think we need to be a bit more savvy, a bit more marketing-led, a bit more client-focused in terms of saying and giving them that reassurance, just as we do every single day with products, right? BMW is not the ultimate driving machine, right? Skoda is exactly the same as Volkswagen, and Volkswagen is 25% more expensive. This is marketing, folks, and I think we need to, as a sector, we need to be ballsier and more confident to get out there and start selling it.
Now I'm going to get told off.
No. I just wanted to say, because I know, so Rich, you were talking about how do we foster, innovation, experimentation inside an organisation, and I think that we need to look at how do we do that as a sector as well. And I think what we are bad at is peer-to-peer learning, and I could make this into one long advert for ASC. But genuinely, people are so proprietary and they're not willing to share. And I just think if we had more opportunity, like at ASC conferences, we have had conferences in the past where people are willing to come and talk about failure to potentially competitors, And I think if we can, as a sector, more peer-to-peer learning, learn from each other, especially with this stuff, we would all be moving a lot quicker. And I just think we don't do that very well. I think we're very protective of things. And I think it's why ASC has a place, because it is about that peer-to-peer. Very few clients in the room, so people can be really honest.
I was going to just add one more thought on those points, both those points, and Dan's point about marketing is, even internally, I think innovations of people in research, I include that in myself, are not very good at being more ballsy internally. So example, for an R&D budget, you might get like a line item each year, and that will get cut at some point halfway through anyway. I had once tried to push, it didn't work, but I do think like if you've created something that is then driving revenue, you should be much more ballsy about going to the CFO and sort of saying like, I want 1% of all sales of that to come back into my innovation budget for next year, so I can build a pot and keep doing this. But that's a really hard conversation. It doesn't very often happen, and it's next year you've just had this great success, and you're back to like square one of whatever the percentage that they'll give you. So I think it's just back to both those points of like coming together, having more presence, and marketing your own stuff internally, and being a bit more ballsy about getting that money to do more work as you go.
Yeah, I think one thing I'd also add to that, sort of thing to consider too, is that I think a lot of the time people think about the unrealized gain rather than the potential loss. In a lot of cases, there is also perhaps a cost if you don't decide to innovate or you don't decide to change how you do something. Businesses don't exist in a vacuum. The market around you is also shifting, and so it's an important part of operating a sustainable entity that you try new things out and experiment and iterate your offering. You can have product market fit with what you sell, but you can also lose it. And so another way that I found to kind of encourage people to try new things is to also think about that. Not doing something is also a decision, and so there's a cost to not innovating as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then we're running out of time, so I just wanted to sort of end and ask you, thinking about innovation? Are there particular products, technologies? What are you itching to try at the moment? What's exciting you? AI. Yeah. We're already doing it.
So it's not a new technology, but I was quite sad that we didn't, as a sector, really seem to do anything with blockchain. So it was kind of mentioned as a potential solution to some of the data fraud, and there were some organisations that were kind of looking, and I kind of thought, well, this is something that could be a bit of a step change here. And I don't know if it was an adoption issue. I'm not saying it was the solution to data fraud. I'm saying blockchain was something that I thought we were going to explore more as a sector. So I'm hoping someone still will. I don't know if it was an adoption issue or what the issue with that was, but I think that's something that we could have looked at a bit harder.
So from a client perspective, I was going to say Nirvana is better, faster, cheaper. I mean, clients are really simple like that. It's just like, if you can tick 2, if you can tick 3, then I'm orgasmic. But 2 is Nirvana, right? Better, faster, cheaper. It's as simple as that. And as Richard said, they don't really care how you get to there. They kind of trust you. One thing I did want to mention, because trust has been mentioned, trusted partnerships are really, really important, right? I always think you get the best work if you've worked with a client for a long period of time. And some clients will not get it. And I just wanted to give a plug to you might have heard about it, the Aura Working Well Together charter. If you haven't, please Google it, because what Aura are trying to do is they are trying to get clients, and it is a client initiative, to be more respectful of agencies' time and thought processes and rewarding them properly. I mean, we've got a long way to go, but I did want to mention that because I think sort of Rebecca mentioned in terms of having a great relationship with certain clients. Certain clients are not very good, and you'll know who they are, and I would step away if commercials allow you to and not be bullied. The Working Well Together initiative, talk to your clients, see if they've signed it, and sign up for yourselves. I think it's a very good first step in terms of trying to foster an environment where agencies are allowed to do really good work.
Great, thank you. And then, so we have a few moments, so I just wanted to throw it open to Jerome. Thank you.
Just a point, I think innovation often comes from tech companies. And tech companies are not market research companies. So tech companies might innovate, they're going to try to sell to market research, and market research companies will not be able to sell it to the end client. And the success of Zappy is when the middleman has been removed. They innovate fast, and that's what's taking the world by storm. So I think it's important that either market research companies change and include tech, or they will remove market research companies. I don't know if you agree, but that's my point.
You're suggesting that the success of Zappy is essentially hiding the fact that there's research involved?
No, it's the fact that directly, no, research is really important, of course, and there's innovation in research. But there to get to the faster, cheaper, better, it was done by removing a lot of people, a lot of DP people, it's like automated products. And the way to convince, market research companies are, don't want to cut their costs, so they're not going to agree to fire a lot of people just to be faster. That's where there's a problem, like a disconnect between innovation that's going to come from tech, from other way, and the fact that to sell it, it's best sold by tech people sometimes, rather than researchers.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. I think there's a real tension between researchers and tech, and back to the things we were saying at the start about fear and the unknown. But it's always frustrated me that a couple of times in my career I've had I felt was a really good idea within a research agency, just wouldn't get back, just left, did it, and then they're essentially then buying it back 2 years later, which feels like a waste of money and a waste of time for everybody. Whereas research companies don't seem to embrace the building of that tech from within, or buying startup tech and embedding in their systems really early to take advantage of that. I think we'd all be better if the two worlds were seen as much more unified, rather than like there's research agencies and there's res tech, and it's like let's throw it all in the mix. It'd be much better off. It's got to be the future agency. It has to be the fully tech-enabled one.
I know I meant to keep us to time, but this is actually a subject that's very near and dear to my heart, so I'm going to indulge myself a little bit because I actually wanted to ask a question at the first half of the session, cut off halfway between Bex and Jack, of how do we deal with that? Because when you have a tech company like yourselves, like the Zappies, which I worked for, and like Bounce, where I work for now, and research mindsets, of which I was raised in the traditional research world, how do we square that challenge of like a fire for innovation from tech-minded people, but also a desire to ensure the quality and have the rigor and meet the principles and make data accessible? How do we get those teams working together? I'm really curious, maybe from you, Jack, because you were a little bit quiet in that section. How do we deal with that?
I think it depends on the business and the product that you're selling. I think if you're building a solution for anything, you need to really deeply understand the audience and the customer base. And so I think for us, vast majority of the people we sell to are research agencies. We talk to them every day. We make a lot of effort to kind of like really deeply understand these problems. I think you can innovate these things internally. There is a big advantage to being an external provider in that we get a massive range of opinions from different people. We benefit from having a wide customer base who provide us with a lot of feedback that really enables that. But I think working closely with your customer is absolutely paramount to developing a useful product that works really well.
Sorry, yeah. I will try this in one sentence. Diverse teams, and recruitment, I think that is really the key to kind of meeting in the middle, and that's just true for everything that we want to do better. The answer quite often is look at your recruitment, get more diverse people, thoughts and things around the table, and stop saying, we've always done it that way. I know Dean did a paper about AST, but but we need to.
Yes. So.
We're a few minutes over time. I don't know, Neil, do you want to close?
No, I was just going to say, I just wanted to say thank you to the panel and to give them a big round of applause.